Hey guys, John here, and I'm going to talk about three awesome rock and roll records from the early 2000s. These are overlooked and underrated, and they're really three of my favorites. And the last one is the best one, so stick around for that. That's a great record. But the first record is by a band called The Briefs from 2000. And we saw The Briefs, I think, in Las Vegas. It was like a festival, a whole bunch of bands playing, and I'd never heard of them. We never heard of them. Sarah was with me and some friends. And after seeing like so many bands, it's hard to stand out. And the Briefs came out and just kicked butt. They had the look down. They were energetic, jumping around on stage, and they had the songs and they had their whole style. It was just so refreshing at the time. And this album, I don't know if it was out when we saw them or it just came out or whatever, but this is around that time. Maybe we saw them a little before. I don't remember. But absolute breath of fresh air for that 2000 era. Because you got to remember, for punk rock in 2000, was a lot of that scally cap, tough guy stuff with the gang choruses, like hardcore, like angry stuff. And the other part, a lot of punk was going on was that kind of Stooges meets heavy metal thing, that fistful of rock and roll sound with like the Helicopters, Turbo Negro, a lot of that like street metal punk rock and roll, very guitar based. But this was an absolute breath of fresh air, especially that time. We were starting to dig into the early obscure British punk, because a lot of that stuff we'd never heard of in the 80s. And I mean, sure, some people knew this stuff, but Americans, a lot of that stuff wasn't getting reissued until the 90s on CD only, and the internet was still pretty new to us rockers, so you couldn't just type in there and find every single obscure band. So we were digging that. We were getting back to that 77 UK sound, and at the same time this is happening. And this is a perfect combination of the early California catchy punk. They're from Seattle, so total West Coast sound. But had that whole early like 79 Dickies, 70, 78, like kind of California catchy punk mixed with the really cool UK 77 sound of that like kind of like the Damned, like that sloppy, I don't care, snotty kind of having fun punk. And it was really refreshing to hear fun punk, and all these songs are catchy, and it was just great. And this album clocks in at under a half hour, which was also refreshing because so many bands are putting out CD only, and they're putting in 60 minutes, sometimes 70 minutes worth of music, and no new bands, maybe there's exceptions, have that much music. A half hour is 20 minutes is probably the best for new bands. And I think the 90s got really boring with all these people putting out 60 minutes. Like if you look at rock and roll, how many good double albums are there? Really, 7 that are necessary? Like London Calling, Jimi Hendrix Experience, Electric Ladyland, Physical Graffiti, Exile Main Street, Blonde on Blonde. Really not a lot of double studio albums that are worth it, yet let alone new bands putting out 60 minutes of music. Ridiculous. But 27 minutes, 28 minutes, whatever this is, it's solid. Every tune is catchy. I'll play some samples, but I just want to show they had a bunch of singles. We really liked them. We've seen them when they came to Boston, maybe Providence. We'd see them each time, but they had some really fun singles. And these are, pretty cool. And then I had, what else did I have? They put out a little promo 3-song off the first album disc. I think we saw them opening for the Damned at one point. I don't know, that's probably where we got this. But a lot of fun. And then the second album came out, and I think it wasn't as good, although they have a track called, if you know the adverts, Looking Through Gary Gilmore's Eyes, the serial killer who donated his eyes. But they have Looking Through Gary Glitter's Eyes when all that Gary Glitter stuff was happening. So that was really funny. But this is a good record, but it was a step down. I think after seeing them a few times, they kind of lost a little of the magic. And one of the members, I think it was Daniel J. Travanti, which is a great name, had left, got replaced, and they were playing a little faster and stuff. But this album is just perfect, and it was perfect timing, and everything was great about them. And let's hear the opening track, Poor and I'm Weird, to give you the gist of it. I'm poor and I'm weird, baby. You got no time for me. I'm poor and I'm weird, baby. You got no time for me. I'm poor and I'm weird, baby. You got no time for me. I'm poor and I'm weird, baby. You got no time for me. I'm poor and I'm weird, getting bitter by a second. I used to have some money, but my offer was fiddle. I'm stopping to a lady selling something out of my house. Think about it, talk to you, I'm stopping to a what I think it's all that I get is what I pay to the They got a track also here I really love called Silver Bullet, about their hatred for Bob Seger.
Kill Bob Seger right now. I like to take your records and I throw them in the trash. I'm on a touch of bricks and make the two of us crash. You think you're not gonna rock, I'm gonna get you anyhow. Kill Bob Seger right now. Kill Bob Seger right now. Kill, die, kill, die.
Another great 77 sounding tune, Rotten Rotten Love.
I'd like to just look at it. Yeah, yeah. I think you look better. Oh yeah. No change for someone, not someone like me. But it takes no mistakes. Everybody say, oh no. Right, right, love.
They got a great track called New Case, which is funny. I was only 17 when something got a hold of me. I got a new case. I got a new case of crabs. Really funny track called Dolly Parton. We're going to play, last track I'll do by them is New Shoes. This was always great live. It was a lot of fun and captures the importance of style and clothes and rock and roll, which was lost, a lot in the 90s and 2000s. It was the era of the slouches. People dressed like slouches. But to get style back into rock and roll, great. But new pair of shoes.
Got a new pair of socks and they go with my shoes, oh yeah. Got a new pair of socks and they go with my shoes, oh yeah. Got a new pair of socks and they go with my shoes. Everyone around me gotta tell me all the news. I got a new pair of shoes and I'm better than you, alright. Alright, alright. Alright, alright. Alright.
All right, the next band I'm going to talk about is probably only my favorite because nobody talks about them and they're completely forgotten about. But this band I saw live and they were great. And I think we bought the CD of them and it was fantastic. And these songs stuck with me. I think they were a great, great band. And they did a second album, which I heard and I didn't get. Maybe I was now out of them or it just faded off. And then they just completely disappeared, whether they imploded or just faded away. But they're not a classic band, and you could get the record for cheap or the CD for cheap. But it's a band called The Time Flies. And they were young kids, and they were just trashy, lo-fi rock and roll. I picture like the Runaways meets like the early Kinks, that like they're when their primitive guitar meets the New York Dolls, except played by the Mummies. Very lo-fi and sloppy, but they got some good tunes. And this album, I'm sure, is probably 27 minutes or whatever. And this came out on Birdman Records in 2005. We saw them and they were great. I think I might have seen them twice. But I remember, and my memory is a big haze, I don't know, but I remember seeing them. I think we ran into them in New York at a bar, or they weren't playing, and they just looked so cool. They had, they just, like this trashy rock and roll. They're from Oakland or San Francisco, and they look cool. And I remember looking at them and like being in bands, nothing big, whatever, but, and saying, I now feel like the older generation. They're about 6 years younger than us, or whatever. I'm like seeing them in their van. They're all skinny and dressed up and looking cool. And they got their thing going on, not huge or anything, but they got their confidence. And like, now, like that's the new generation. Now I feel like the older guy. And this is the band that's got the energy on stage. And I could see that was like the next generation taking over. Because even though I was a little older, you'd see the young bands and you'd always think they were cheesy or not quite ready for prime time. But I think this was the first band I saw that I said, oh, there's a new crew coming in, pushing us out. But they were awesome. And I'm not recommending this record. I'll play some samples, but I will say, out of what do they got? They got 12 songs on here. I'd say 9 songs are excellent, which is a really good thing for a young unknown band. But they had a couple of singles. I think this might be the first single, Energy and PC Actions. Pretty good trashy rock and roll. It's a timepiece. But this one's really good. What's it? The Wet Ones and Christine. These are two. This is a good single. And I don't know what else they had. Second album, like I said, they put the second album out and I kind of faded away on them. But let's hear Jailbait. Great song. She was born just a little too late. Yeah, she's my jailbait or something like that. But if she was born in 1988, and I think like 1988, you'd be like 35 now. But she's a little jailbait, but I like that song. The most catchiest song, and this song is going to be stuck in my head forever. I think it's going to sound like lo-fi garbage to a lot of you people, but to me, it sticks in my head. It's in there as much as Satisfaction or any song you heard a million times. But Dirt, My Best Friend. We're going to hear In My School. I love that one. What's the lyrics is so funny. You better not turn up your radio head. In my school, cool is the rule. Your disco death rock should remain dead. In my school, cool is the rule. But dig this band, not recommending it, but you could probably get this album for $10. Probably I recommend CDs on these. Like you could probably get the CD for $5 if you want to just put it in the car and listen. But great party record, great like album to play before you're going out. But that's that. The last band I'm going to talk about, which is the best album of the batch, and I would say this is a 10-star record, and it is The Exploding Hearts. And this came out on CD in 2003. They're from Portland, and they're on Dirtnap Records. And it was this band doing power pop, the Briefs doing punk rock, and there was a band called the Epoxies, also from Portland, doing kind of new wave, like synth punk, new wave punk kind of thing. And those three came out on Dirtnap at the same time, or roughly within the same 2 years. And it was like a trio from the West Coast bringing all this old-fashioned music back to us. And the Epoxies I saw live, they were good, but I don't put them in the same boat. Their sincerity wasn't as much as the Exploding Hearts and the Briefs. I felt like we see them, they were putting on their costumes, kind of like their new wave with the duct. They were putting electrical tape around their legs and arms and put their glasses on, and it didn't feel as real, but they were a good band. I don't want to knock them, but the Exploding Hearts were fantastic, and they were power pop. They brought back power pop at the right time, pretty much before it came back for the third time. You know, and this is 2003. They were on the money, and we were digging power pop, and you could see it's kind of bubbling under that new sound. And if you follow punk, like it ebbs and flows with different influences and different trends, but they were right there on the forefront when everyone was getting back into power pop, and they put out a stellar record. And I'm going to show this. I've not yet even opened it, but I bought the vinyl reissue. It came out this year, and this was Third Man did it. And such an important record. But what the thing about this band is, they put out this album, and like a couple of months later, and this album made it big. Like everyone was digging this record. And then they were on tour on the West Coast, driving back to Portland, I think. And the van flipped over, and 3 of the 4 guys died. So it was a big shock to everybody, you know, on the scene. They weren't big yet, but to a lot of people, that was a big deal. I know, like, people like Ryan Kidd, people a little younger than me, that was like their Lynyrd Skynyrd or Randy Rhoads or Cliff Burton, the death of someone in their prime. But they lost 3 out of 4 members, the singer, guitar player, bass player, and drummer. So only the guitar player survived. So that's it. There's a posthumous, there's a record that came out after they died of like the unreleased stuff. But this is the classic record, and I've yet to hear it. We're going to open this. I'm going to play some tracks. This is, I think, remastered, and it's got 3 bonus tracks, which I don't really care. I mean, it's good to have them, but the album was perfect. It probably clocked in under a half hour. And to describe this record, it's got like Rolling Stones guitar, and it sounds like Elvis Costello and the Clash, like London Calling era Clash, except without anger or that pompous like self-importance. Just like these are kids just playing like catchy power pop tunes a la Cheap Trick, except sloppy, punk rockish, and just fun. And they wrote catchy songs, and every song on this album is great, and I highly recommend this. And now that you could get this reissue probably for $25 or whatever, and I haven't heard it yet, but I imagine it's going to be good. And yes, there's distortion on the original recordings. It's not a great like audiophile recording, but it captures this band and the hooks and the songs. And I'm going to play, let me open this, but we're going to play Modern Kicks, the first song off this, and probably their most famous. This looks great, expanded and remastered by Third Man Records. And this is a band, like, I know my wife or anyone who tells other people to get or turn them on, they all came back and said, oh man, thanks for turning us on to them. But we'll hear, maybe we'll hear I'm a Pretender. I think we'll hear that one. About the more ballady one, Jailbird. And this album only came out on CD only, so everyone had the CD in America. I think it was released in Europe on LP, but for all intents and purposes, this was only on CD. So thank goodness for Third Man. It's on Tough Break Records, putting it out. It was actually reissued before on vinyl, but this is the first time I'm picking it up. So it's worth it, man. There it is. Maybe we'll hear Sleeping Aids and Razor Blades. You're Black and Blue. This record, I highly recommend this one to anyone to just grab the CD. You could probably get cheap, but fantastic power pop rock and roll. And thanks for listening, guys. I hope you dug some of these tracks as much as I did. Cheers.